2019 meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission to order, and if the administrator would call the roll.
Hank Begelman.
Here.
Kate Payne. Richard Dane.
Here.
Mary French.
Here.
Stephanie Garner.
Here.
Lance Gritters.
Here.
David Huser. Kathy Olson.
Here.
Heidi Solheim.
Here.
Thank you. You have before you the agenda for tonight's meeting as was sent out. Do we have a motion for approval?
Move approval. Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any changes? Hearing none, those in favor of approving the agenda, say yes.
Yes.
Those opposed, no. The agenda is approved as printed. The minutes of the June 20, 2019 meeting of the Commission are in front of you. Any additions, corrections? And if not, do we hear a motion to receive them?
They just seemed as if they were a little different format this time, like it was probably a transcription of the tape or something.
We have a new scribe.
Okay. You?
No. No, I don't write that well.
Actually, I think Paige did those. So she does it based on reviewing the tape, and so she does a little bit more detail than those of us who have been here.
Okay.
I've only done it once, so I haven't done it.
The only interesting comment I found was we use the first person pronoun when certain people who are at a high calling have spoken. I'll show it to you, Bill.
Okay.
Okay.
My own personal reaction was that it was maybe a little more detailed than we needed.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he's going to be doing from now on, so he can take that to heart.
Less detail. Got it.
Less is more.
That's okay. So do we hear a motion to approve the minutes as printed?
I so move.
We have motion,
Second.
motion and a second. All in favor, say yes.
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 Opposed, no. And the minutes are approved as printed. Lance, I want to take a moment out to introduce you, and if you would tell us a little bit about yourself, and welcome to Waverly.
My name's Isaac Peasley. I'm the new zoning administrator. I'm coming here from Ottumwa. I was a city planner there for 3 years, and I graduated from Northern Iowa, so I'm kind of familiar with the area. So, yeah, and my wife and I just bought a house here, so we're in it for the long haul.
Great.
Welcome aboard.
Yeah, thank you.
It's good to have you. We're going to take the agenda a little bit out of order tonight. We don't have any scheduled public hearings, but under regular business, item 3 is a I don't think so. Item 3 is the review and discussion of the hospital expansion site plan.
On the printed it is, but on our agenda it's 4.
Wow. Whatever.
The paper agenda, so.
In any case, if we could move to that item, and if staff would kick this thing off. And
I can go ahead and introduce it. This is something that the hospital's obviously been working on for some time. As you recall, the hospital property in full, in the entirety, is actually within a planned development district. So the zoning on this particular property is PD, which means that they are supposed to go by the site plan that they created when the zoning was created. My understanding is that the hospital probably predated the planned development, and that there was no actual original site plan. So what we considered it as staff as being the hospital's footprint, basically before any changes are made, would be the site plan. So what we do is look at what changes are being proposed with regards to this project, and then decide whether or not that constitutes a minor or a major change in the PD. It doesn't really relate to whether it's a large dollar item, like the multi-million-dollar project that this is, what it means is you look at the code sections and they talk in terms of if you're increasing the square footage by 50% or more, or if you're and those kinds of measurements. We're not changing outside streets. We're not changing, we're only adding one driveway in addition to anything else outside of the site. We're adding parking, but the proposed addition is a fairly small percentage of the existing square footage. So as staff, we considered this to be a review that required staff oversight and staff review, which occurred between our planning department, the engineering department, on several occasions with the engineers and with the architects. We've gone through a number of ideations of the plan and come back and forth with the group. And we find that this site plan works well for the city's interest in the terms of how it accesses onto city streets and how it will affect our city thoroughfares. With regards to the plan on site, we checked with fire officials about the location of hydrants and access for fire vehicles. And so we felt like we've made a pretty complete review of this process. So we still consider it a minor change because it isn't changing density like it would if you were changing a residential PD from R1 single-family housing to R4 apartment housing, that kind of thing. It changes density in the sense that we're increasing a little bit of the square footage, but again, those numbers don't even come close to what is considered an example of a major change when you have a large scale change. So we felt that staff has fully vetted the plan, but we didn't, and we don't know that, we think that's sufficient under the ordinance, but this is a big project. It's a public project. It's a project that I think everybody's interested in. And so we wanted the Planning and Zoning Commission to review it and comment. And then it's going to go to council on the 19th just to get a blessing from the council also. We think in a project like this, it's appropriate to do that, despite the fact that staff has really reviewed this and vetted it properly.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay.
It would be good if we could hear from representatives from the hospital just to talk about this. I had the chance a couple of months ago to look at the plan, and it's exciting what they have in mind. So, Jim, Heidi.
Yep. Thank you. Thanks for the time tonight. Yep. Thank you for the time tonight. Jim Addy, I'm the CEO at the Waverly Health Center. Heidi Solheim, COO, and somebody who I understand you're very familiar with. We wanted to take some time tonight to talk about kind of the bird's eye view of the property and where we plan to take the property into the future. At the council meeting, as you mentioned, on the 19th, we do plan on doing a more in-depth dive of what's happening inside, but for the purposes of this meeting, we did want to focus on really our footprint and what we really had in mind, okay? We'll kind of go through that quickly, and then both will be available for some Q&A if that's okay.
It's good.
Okay. So, as Bill mentioned, I'm going to try to sneak over this way if I can. Grab this. There we go. All right. We have right here and here expansion onto our current building, okay? We're looking at about 30,000 square feet of new build that will be coming off of our existing building, coming off of our existing building, okay? That 30,000 square feet is about 15% of our total square footage, if that gives you a little bit of scale. Along with that, we do have 40,000 square feet of renovation that will take place in the oldest parts of the building. We have areas that go back to 1964 that obviously need a little TLC. And anytime you're building on new, just the ability to tie to a new build and an old build together will also require a little TLC, okay? So as you can see, our new expansion will come here. But around the outside, our plan is to truly make wayfinding a little bit easier. for those that have had to come onto our grounds and find certain areas, you understand that it's troubling. If you need to come to our emergency room, it can be difficult if you've never been there before. And what we hoped is by making some of these changes, we will help with that wayfinding. Okay. At the same time, we have grown both in services and number of staff, and with that is the need for more parking. We are spilling out onto the streets and have not always been the best of neighbors, and we're hoping that making an investment in the parking that we will not only give our patients better access to the facility, but we will also give our employees ample parking so that we can keep them self-contained. Okay? So I'd like to just walk through this right now, if I could, and get your bearings. This is 2nd and 8th, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So 2nd and 8th really make up our north and our eastern boundary. On the south, we have the fence line that goes along the golf course, okay, and the railroad tracks to the west. As you come in on 8th, right now, we have one entrance to access this side of the building. What we would like is another entrance that ultimately lines up with the cross street right here on 4th Avenue, okay? This will be a main road that goes all the way around our campus. And why this is important is because right now, when accessing this side of the building, many times people enter and feel, should I be here? It doesn't look very welcoming, especially if you're looking for our walk-in clinic or our emergency room. Again, we want to make it as easy as possible for our patients to be able to access the services that will be right here, okay? So once you make your turn, there is quite an elevation change here. Now that actually proves to be a benefit when it comes to wayfinding, because we will have a giant sign on our emergency room that will be right here, letting people know you're in the right place. This road, once again, a very clear path around the building that will lead them directly to it, okay? A couple of things that we don't have right now in the emergency room is a good drop-off, so we will have a canopied entrance along this access here, okay? And then dedicated parking for what will ultimately be the emergency room right here, okay? Right now, typically individuals access our emergency room right about here. Not very good parking, not very illuminated, again, not easy to get to. Parking right here. This parking will also service the clinic offerings that we will have here. Again, we will go over that at the city council meeting, but for the sake of this, parking and access to this part of the building, okay? If you were to continue coming in this way or this way, the first thing that you'll notice is we have a little split in the road. This is to accommodate our ambulances, okay? Right now, we service 3, sometimes 4 counties with ambulance service. Our ambulance crew goes an awful long way to make sure that people are covered. We have ambulance crews that are servicing their own communities that bring their individuals here. This access right here allows them really a back entrance and an offstage entrance right into the emergency room from the ambulance, okay? But if you were to stay on this road, it will bring you back up to what's typically referred to as the main entrance or the green entrance right now. And when you come up here, if you enter from 8th here, or 2nd, I'm sorry, right now we have it so that you have to kind of make your turn and then jog over, and it's really kind of awkward getting to the back side of the building, okay? Once again, these will be connected, allowing individuals to access the parking up at the green, but then seeing, once again, that line of sight all the way back to the emergency room, to the ambulance, if they were to enter from that side, okay? So we are adding, it's about 94 parking spots, I think is where we landed.
For the lower level?
For the lower level here, and I can't remember how many.
In total, it's about 150 additional parking
Yeah.
spots for the whole campus.
Okay. No major renovations on this side of the building. Honestly, we're quite happy, and those are newer builds. But when we look at our green entrance, a couple of things that we're going to be able to do there is, once again, give better parking and better access to the individuals that need to continue to use the green entrance. Right now, physical therapy, Taylor Physical Therapy, extremely high utilized service, but unfortunately, the way we have this tiered parking does not, it's quite difficult for people, especially if they're going to access therapy where they may have difficulties getting around. We're adding more ground level parking and more handicap parking to better serve this entrance. Okay? So really what we're trying to accomplish is a more meaningful way to traverse the entire campus, okay? Good lines of sight so that you can find the services that you're looking for, and more parking. We don't really leak out into the community unless you consider this new stop, or this new entrance, I apologize, really affecting the traffic patterns. So from our perspective, we feel that these are the major site renovations that we're looking at. We can go into more details, happy to answer any questions that you might have.
How many stories is the addition?
It will be, for the most part, a single-story addition. Really, the only slight area where we go into 2 stories is right here, and that's really for support and for some mechanicals for what would ultimately be our outpatient medicine. Okay? Not going to be public facing.
Right. The new addition is on the 3rd floor of our building. So we're one of the few buildings in town, if not the only, that you can enter ground level on all 3 levels of our hospital, which makes wayfinding very difficult. The new addition, though, will really be, for all intents and purposes, will be on the 3rd floor. So that won't have a basement under a majority of it. The small part that Jim pointed out that does is for mechanicals. So we'll be putting in a new boilers and other air handling units in that part of the building.
Heidi, say a little bit about the inside, because you folks have done some really incredible things in terms of managing traffic flow, direct service, those kinds of things.
Right. Well, with this project, and we've been working on this project for about 3 years in the planning process, through master planning all the way through, we're now in construction documents. But we had 3 goals, and those goals didn't change during the entire process. The first one was our new emergency room. The emergency room right now, we're able to function in it, but it's certainly not ideal, especially with the changing needs of emergency health care when it comes to behavioral health concerns and other staff safety. So emergency room is one of our #1 priorities. The second is the need for clinic space. Healthcare is not expanding in the areas of inpatients. It's really expanding into more primary care so we can help patients stay well, get well, stay well, and live in their homes longer. So really for us, it's emergency department, it's clinic space, and finally wayfinding, which I think is what Hank was alluding to. We have 7 additions onto our current building. If you've been in any hospital that's not a brand new hospital, it is hard to get around. So working with the architects and with patients and other members of the community, we've been able to, we think, really resolve that. With the entire renovation and expansion, we're moving almost every outpatient service up to the green entrance area or up to the 3rd floor. So no longer are patients going to have to take elevators and try to switch from different floors of the hospital. In addition to that, we've straightened all of the corridors. So right now, when you stand at our green entrance and you're looking towards lab and radiology, you can't see either one of those departments. So we will have a grand concourse that will open up all of those areas, and in one point you'll be able to see the outpatient services as you look down the hallway. Just a huge saver for us. Right now we have great volunteers that escort patients all through the hospital, but it just adds that little more stress for patients. So by being able to clear up the wayfinding, and the outside of the campus is another part of that, of how we're trying to clear that up. When you come into the clinics, you can decide to use the green entrance or you can decide to use the new clinic entrance, and either one will have great parking available for it. So Jim had already mentioned, as far as the green entrance, we currently have 4 handicap spots that are on ground level. The other handicap spots, you have to either walk up a hill or you have to walk upstairs. So by making changes to the drive, we're able to add, I think it's about 14 new parking spaces at ground level, which will really be ample needs for that area. Plus the new parking lot on the south side will have an extended amount. The entire first tier, 2 rows of parking on that one are at ground level. So very easy for people to get to the parking, or get to from the parking to the clinics and back again.
About other questions or comments?
Are you using detention or retention?
Detention, and we've actually spoken with the Golf Commission. What we had looked at were detention ponds really all along this side of our building, okay? And the golf course actually already has detention on this side of the course, kind of onto our property. They more or less can collect into one another. And so by meeting with the Golf Commission, we feel like we found a way to kind of tie into what they're doing. So it will be on kind of both properties at the same time to serve detention for not only what we currently have, but also for a further expansion if we ever come to that point.
Jim and I'll be retired by then, so.
Seems like this is going to take an awful lot of volume, 150 parking spots plus the additions. I haven't had a lot of time to look at this, but it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of space dedicated to that detention.
So I can't speak intelligently on the volume and what we had. However, we have had our engineers. They're the ones that have come to us and said these are the possible solutions. We can get you any of those reports that you'd like to see.
I think the city has the wastewater report, so all of it has been looked at, and the retention pond or detention pond that we are building is actually bigger than what it needs to be. We're building it bigger in case we ever do develop the other part of the property. So we're planning ahead for that. We very likely will have another detention pond right behind the parking lots, just from, there's a couple benefits to that. First, it slows the water down more, and we don't have to have quite as much piping to move the water around too. So I think in our final plan, we're probably going to have a little bit more that's just all contained within our property too. So we're working with the city and with the golf course to make sure that it's not a pond of water sitting there for the golfers.
We don't want to affect play.
Yeah.
We don't want to affect play, but we did feel like it was a good solution for.
Right. Jim mentioned the elevation. So it is from the point of the road where 4th Avenue and 8th Street match up to the door of our emergency department is a 32-foot elevation rise. So with that, there's an extensive amount of dirt we will be bringing in, but it's really the only way we can develop the property. And this part of the property, it makes the most sense for us to develop because the area between the two buildings in here, we have several $1 million of utilities that run in that area, and so they would have to all be moved before we could do any development there. So we're really trying to avoid that because it's several $1 million that then takes away what we can offer for patients, for the environment and services we're going to be offering there. So we've tried to develop that in several master plans, and it was going to be, I think our most recent was about $70 million if we were going to try to develop that area.
Yep, I mean, we are absolutely thankful to have the facility that we have. But when you look at us, we are truly landlocked on two of our sites. We have railroads and we have road. Okay, down here we were not able to get adjacencies because of what's already in there right now, which really does only leave this area. So it was a great place, as we mentioned, for a mansion back in the early 1900s. We would have appreciated some flatter ground for a hospital, but we think that we came up with a creative way to tackle that.
There was quite a discussion about the detention pond and it's not a pond, detention area that will be next to the golf hole, next to 8th Street.
Behind, yeah.
It's really only about 4 foot deep. It's a pretty level bottom. It'll be mowed, so it will kind of blend in as far as the look from the golf course. Behind it's going to be that bank that will be 15 to 20
About 12,
feet.
yeah, 12, 15 feet.
Yep. So it will have a bank there, and hopefully that will be maintained properly and look nice
Oh,
for the view.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And we're going to continue to work with the golf course and city staff on that part of it. We're going to take direction from them, what they would like to see, and whether the fence goes back up or we just have the road and sidewalk as the barriers.
Yep.
Yeah.
The current one that's up in the northeast corner of 2nd Avenue and 4th Street, that's a detention that's been there, worked. We've never had any problems with it. It's properly maintained. It's accommodated all the drainage so far. So they've actually sized that lower one to accommodate all of the future building that you see on on the plan if it ever gets built.
How about others?
I think for our purposes and what you wanted this commission to know, I think it's accurate.
I don't think there's any action that we need to take this evening except to thank you for coming out and sharing this with us, and all the best.
All right. Thank you. Thank you all.
Do want to acknowledge the fact that our mayor is with us this evening, Dean Soash. And Dean, some of you don't know this, Dean once served on this commission, and it's where we first met. And so it's good to have you with us, sir. Okay, the next item on the agenda, regular business. Review and discuss plat of survey for the property located at 109 First Street Southwest. Staff?
Yes, so this property is owned by Four Queens Real Estate LLC. As you said, 109 First Street Southwest. They are requesting a plat of survey for that property. As you can see on the plat of survey, the property will be split up into two parcels, parcel EE, which will be on the western half, and then parcel FF, which will be on the eastern half. Four Queens is currently doing business on what is the proposed parcel EE. This is pursuant to a development agreement with the city. And not to get too much into the development agreement, but the development agreement essentially says that the city is going to acquire the proposed parcel FF, then they're going to develop that. The city will develop that, and it goes into that in the development agreement. So the staff recommends approval of the plat of survey. That's
Okay, any questions? Comments?
Some of this, as I understand it, is kind of a waiting game until the Bremer Avenue Bridge is complete, correct?
Yeah, some of the improvements that we're talking about with the trail connection and those kinds of things, although we're kind of changing some of that, we're going to see if we can maybe accommodate a smaller trail, because we're looking at the entrance to Four Queens and how it's working, and we're going to see how things, when they settle down to a normal business rush, and see whether it's necessary to widen that drive. Because that was one of the things that for safety, we wanted to make sure that you didn't have cars backing onto the street. And if we had the ability to go around the cars that are in the queue for the drive-through, that would help that situation. So we're still, it's a work in progress, and as soon as we make some decisions about that, we need to work on the back end, the backside somewhat. We've got some landscaping things that'll be done, those kinds of things, to do a little better job of protecting people from that bank. Although the bank's always been there, now people can see it. So it's something that we want to keep moving forward with what we're doing.
This all ties into our trail system and
Yes.
the rest of it.
Yep. And the South Riverside Park connection, because that's. Yep.
I was just back there on Monday night, we were doing senior pictures, and I was going to go under the bridge, and it really needs some TLC back there for sure. Can't get down there, can't really do anything.
We've decided that we didn't really want to do a lot of work in there and then have them tear it up when they're doing the bridge, so. And they were out surveying, so it obviously is going to happen.
No, I think it's wonderful that the development along the river like this is good, and I think it's a good connection between the city and the owners of the property, so.
And I understand further down, you discovered a scale that goes away scale. I'm talking about further south.
Yeah,
Next to the building?
the Farmers Exchange building.
Yeah.
Yeah, when they uncovered that, that's all, we've covered it back up by now, but when they got into that, they found that it had basically a cellar or basement, and had piers, and then the scale actually sat on those, And then they had sent people down in the floor, there's a square that they'd lift up and crawl down in, and they could work with the scale and adjust it and get it working so it worked right. And so we didn't know that they had just filled that in with soil at some point. And so when they started trying to dig up this property to get it ready to be put the sidewalk in front adjacent to First Street, they discovered this concrete bunker, basically. It's beautiful, it's not even affected, and so they just cleaned it all out, and they put a wood deck over top of it like a bridge, and now we have this cool sound when you walk across it. It's kind of like walking across a bridge. So and that's how the sidewalk goes across that area. So it'll be fun to use for different purposes. That building's almost completed with its renovations. Found some cool things in that building also. The old tickets from 50, 100 years ago, and so it's been an interesting project. It'll be able to fit in nicely with that South Riverside Park.
Other questions, comments? Do we hear a motion?
I move approval of the plat survey for the property located at 109 First Street Southwest.
A second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Those opposed, no. The motion is carried. Item number 2, to review and discuss plat of survey for parcel number 10064000007, located at the corner of Iowa Route 3, East Bremer Avenue, and 39th Street Northeast. Staff?
Yes, so as you said, with this parcel number, it's on the corner of Highway 3 and 39th Street. Again, this is a plat of survey. They're proposing to basically split off the southwestern portion of this property into parcel H. That's going to be about 5.96 acres. They're going to put in an implement dealership. Is that a good way to put it?
Yes.
Yep. So it's currently zoned A1. On Monday night, the city council will be the third reading to rezone it to M1 industrial and to make that implement dealership possibility there.
And if you recall, that's the one we actually did the entire quarter instead of just the 6 acres.
So staff recommends approving the plat of survey for parcel 10064000007.
We had the public hearing on this, right? And there's been no further,
Upon rezoning, right?
no further communication or issues raised.
There was 2 readings at the council level. There's just some questions about it, but generally, and people showed up from the neighbors, but no real objections except kind of a little bit of concern about what it's going to look like across the street from them. So. And we are bringing sanitary sewer up to that property on the east side of 39th Street Northeast, so that, because it's down on the other side of the old, the Schneider milling that's now Nutrien. So we had to bring a sewer main up to them so they could have sewer. And we'll go north along 39th.
Okay, the comprehensive future land use plan shows it as commercial industrial. How long has it shown it that way?
I think it was prior to the last 2017 revision.
Okay.
I think it had been before that. So, and that was 2011.
Wasn't that outside of the city at one point? It was in the county. It came in.
I think it's been there since the 2011 though.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, Waverly's city limits used to be right by Terrick, so it's moved out substantially over time. And so you had a lot of things that were built during the county time out that way. And those homes built on 39th would have been built when it was in the county, I believe. As well as the hotel, Star Motel.
I think it may also have been on the 2005. We used to do comp plans on a 5-year cycle, and now we do them on a 10-year cycle with a plan review in the middle. but I think it might have also been on 2005.
It's not really great farmland, and so it really lended itself very well to this type of industrial use. It's got that intersection has left turn lanes going north and south, so that's a really ideal way to have that access off of Highway 3 that's already there.
Do you know what the CSR is?
I don't. Just talking to the property owners, they said it doesn't have a great, it doesn't yield as good as other farmland that they own. So I just took the word from the owner that they thought it wasn't a great piece of farmland.
Other questions, comments? Ready for a motion?
Hank, if we could, last time I was uncomfortable and I remain uncomfortable, which doesn't have to do with this particular rezoning, but we're calling it light industrial because it's a commercial use that doesn't seem to fit because it's large building. I still don't understand why this had to be M1, not C2. It's a commercial property. That entire site would do very well as a commercial property. And by limiting it to M1 and saying that because it will store tractors, it's no longer commercial, I'm not comfortable. I still don't understand why we as a commission think that makes sense.
And I'll give one response to that, I guess, because anything that's a commercial use is allowed in the M1. So we felt like the M1 would allow for everything in C2 and the things in M1. So you could basically have a use like this, the implement dealer that is sort of a mixture of uses. You have some retail component, some commercial component, and you have some more of a warehouse industrial component. It just felt like it provided for more flexibility if there was a warehouse use that wanted to go north of there when it gets further developed, instead of having it be commercial. Because you can put commercial in that M1 district. So that's why we kind of lean towards that, especially with it being we don't know what's going to happen on the east end of town in that type of a setting. It could be an industrial, it could be an industrial use or a warehouse use. Wanted to prepare for that. We didn't want it to be M2, which is some of the zoning that's out there that maybe doesn't fit as well as the M1 district.
So if I'm understanding what you're saying, Bill, the M1 allows the landowner much more opportunity to develop the land to meet the needs of whatever the market might want.
Right, regarding light industrial and commercial.
Bill, I think when we got some of the information from West Des Moines, they were talking too about the kind of traffic that was generated on a commercial property as opposed to an M property, that you have a lot of comings and goings with the one and not so much with the other. How does that play in?
Well, when you get an implement dealership, you're not going to have the constant traffic in and out. I mean, it's one of those big purchase items, and your traffic in and out of one of those dealerships is just not very busy. So again, it's got both components. I mean, when you start thinking about what people do with retail anymore, sometimes your retail is connected to your warehouse is connected to your retail right on site, and it kind of makes it a mixed use in that regard. And there's some places where that's appropriate, and some places where it isn't necessarily appropriate to have that warehouse use in addition to the commercial use.
I move that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the plat survey for parcel 10064-00007.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Those opposed, no. And the motion is carried. Let's go to item number, on the printed agenda, item number 4, to review and discuss an ordinance amendment to the zoning chapter 100, sections 100.13, that's C2, and 100.15, which is M1, which is pretty much what we got into on this last item.
And just to introduce, this was we brought a voting item to you, and we realized that probably it was more appropriate to have a discussion and a full discussion before, bringing an action item to you. So we brought it back just to have a discussion.
Okay. Any other business, old business, and a new business? Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We are adjourned.
So you didn't want to discuss any of it?
Well, wait a minute. I thought you were saying we were done.
Well, no, I'm just saying we brought it back for a study session.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I mean, we started talking about it last time, and I think it was getting late that night, and we said, let's reschedule this for a study session. You can discuss it as much as you want or as little as you want.
What's your pleasure?
Want to reopen the public for the meeting?
What's that?
Do we need to reopen the meeting?
Yeah, you can probably do that.
Okay, we'll call the meeting to order.
Back to order.
I can't wait to see these minutes.
Going to do the roll again?
Well, Isaac, do your magic, okay?
No, I don't think you have to do that.
No.
You can it's like adjourning for a while and reopening the meeting.
Okay, let's talk about this.
so as I understood it, one of the changes has to do with storage units. And if it's storage units within a building, it would be C2. But if it's self-storage, like kind of the rows of self-storage, that would fall within the M1. Is that
Right.
correct?
Except that I would say that the indoor storage units would be a special provisional use, because you still have to come in and say it's appropriate for the situation. Because it kind of depends on how it's accessed, what it looks like, and whether it fits in with the space. So it can be done if it's an indoor unit by doing that process.
What would you say are the negatives of special provisional use requirements?
Well, the negative is that you could limit somebody's ability to get it accomplished. I mean, if you wanted to do an indoor storage and this body did not, or the council did not grant the special provisional use, I mean, there should be some definite criteria as to why that didn't really fit the space when they're requesting it, and there may be some reasons why it didn't fit in. I think most of the time what West Des Moines seemed to be saying is if it fit in an area where it isn't an obvious detracting from the look of the retail neighborhood, that it wouldn't really fit into that. I don't know. I mean, the indoor storage seems to be, it takes away the idea that there's garage after garage after garage lined up on a building in a retail area. It is really a response to some of our locations where storage units were built on commercial property when there really wasn't a good way to say no to it. And the question is, on our corridors, which are generally along our corridors coming into the community, do we want storage units in places where retail may be more appropriate? Commercial and retail.
I tend to lean towards the fact that if I'm the business owner or the property owner, it's really not up to the city to determine if my business is liked or not, which is what you're basically saying. I'm not comfortable with that.
How do you
The-
how do you quantify it fits in?
Right. And I like a lot more definitives in place. And I'm not sure, as I look around the community, we have drive-in self-storage units in numerous locations, and there's not a one of them that's really out of place. I don't know what would prompt us to say we like this one, we don't like that one. I look at one of them. I'm not overly disappointed. I used to look at Terex.
One of the examples that has been given to us is the new structures that are to the west of the Star Motel that was built on the location of the old German restaurant that was out there. Oberhoy, or the Oberhoy restaurant. As being, it was commercially zoned, so it was really, and it's right on the corridor coming in. It's got a side street at good access. It's right next to a residential property, and the residential property was behind it. And, that became storage units. And whether, it was, we believe that it was permitted under the current zoning. I think we tried to work with not being that way, just because I didn't think it was the right thing to have fronting our visible commercial corridor, where you really expect to have more commercial type businesses populating those areas. It's an opinion that a lot of people have. Some people don't care. Some people don't think it's something we should be doing. I just think that if it's a commercial, it's commercial because it's more of a commercial retail type place where you have cars coming and going, and they're easily accessible off the main corridors.
Well, I'm thinking of where I did, stored my stuff for a while in an indoor facility. And it was located and there were office buildings, government office buildings, there was retail, commercial, and everything else. It didn't look that out of place because you had maybe 3 garage doors on the front, and that was the only, other than that, it looked like an office building. Didn't have windows, but it looked like an office building. And it didn't seem to be out of place.
That's why we left that as a special provisional use. Yeah, for that type of an indoor storage, because you can make it look like it blends in to office buildings and things like that. So we did want to say no to that.
But the ones that looked like 1 million garage doors,
Yeah, that's what we were trying to address here, and that's why we have the special provisional use for the indoor storage.
So with our current zoning, for instance, on Bramer Avenue, most of it is C2, right? Like the downtown corridor. So where there's an empty, or C1, well, there's an empty lot along Bramer Avenue, and all of a sudden we have drive-up storage units there. To me, I feel like if that's allowed in our current zoning, it's not really to the best interest of the community to have it be that way. So, from there, but I think like you said, I've seen the ones too in downtowns where it looks like you're just going into a building and you have your locker rooms and different things within there.
So it's a pretty simple, straightforward concern here that we were addressing, and we felt like we tried to do it surgically, so it was just really affecting those types of warehouse storage type places and keeping those particular things out of commercial.
well, and the quote from the West Des Moines Planning and Zoning Commission on it really kind of sums it up pretty well in terms of not putting that in commercial districts.
Other comments?
On this particular piece, I'm okay. I want to go through the C2, but I do think before making a vote, I might suggest David had some particular insight into this last month, as noted in the minutes. I would like to hear what he was thinking. So I might encourage us not to take a vote, but continue our study session next month and see what kind of input David was thinking about. Because with his 25 years of experience on this commission, I think we owe it to him to tap into that experience.
It's a good idea.
I'd like to get it, at some point, get an answer for it. I mean, this is our second month on this topic. David was able to do that. We'd have discussion before we'd vote on it, so we'd certainly have his input if we brought it back for an actual agenda, action item.
Well, I wouldn't have a problem with that.
Okay.
Just as long as it's not tonight.
Right, we're not doing it tonight.
Right, that's
Yeah,
what I'm.
it was not on the
saying.
agenda for action tonight.
Okay.
No, just discussion.
Anything else?
On the C2 portion,
Yeah.
this commission, several years ago, added multifamily dwellings because they are frankly commercial. They are potentially high traffic. And if we want to bring large facility with amenities, we've got to have the space for them. And commercial fits well, because it is a commercial enterprise. And this commission voted unanimously to put it in. We said it had to be a minimum of 12 units or greater. The discussion prior to an amendment was for 16 or greater, recognizing that we don't want to take C2 property and turn it into duplexes or fourplexes. But frankly, I don't see why we are removing it when this commission put it in and it was approved by council, and now 3 years later or whatever, we're taking it back out. I don't see a good reason whatsoever.
Okay, so what we did is, when we redid the R districts, we created a apartment building district. We created a district for apartment buildings like that. We have an R2, or we have an R3 that has 3 and 4, I think, and then everything above 5 and 6 is in the R4 district. So what we try to do is keep, because residential, where it might fit within and adjacent to some commercial districts, it may not be always appropriate within a commercial district. It could be adjacent to it, and it could be something that butts up against one another. But it doesn't necessarily fit in every commercial district, and that's one of those where I would see those coexisting when you have R4s with C2s, because it could be the R4 sits behind the C2, right behind the C2, or right adjacent to it. And I felt like, and I really kind of put that in there just because I saw it and thought, oh, we already took care of that, so we need to fix this time. And that's the only reason I did it, not to say that we can't put apartment buildings adjacent to commercial, but I don't think it should be zoned that way, because our R4 district provision now has site plan requirements and things that aren't necessarily contained within the C2. So if we're going to allow a multifamily large, 10-plex or 8-plex or 12-plex or 16-plex, we really want to look at the other issues that go along with those kinds of developments, and those require that site plan review that we've placed in that R4. So if we have it here, it's not requiring a site plan. If it's in R4, it's requiring a site plan. That's the reason we took it out of here, because it's in there.
Bill, if somebody came in with a 18-unit apartment building, but on the ground floor, it was commercial, would that go into C2, or would it?
That's something we didn't address, but we're going to have to address because that's going to happen at some point in the near
Because
future.
I think the issue is, if you've got a C2 district, and then in the middle of it, you've got apartments, again, you've got a void in that strip.
And what I would probably tell you is that we would put that in a PD. So we would actually create a planned development district for that particular parcel, and then show it as having commercial and housing parts. And I think that's where you use that kind of a district, because it could be you have a high-rise, and next to it you have the commercial side. So basically, you have one parcel that combines both a commercial side and a housing side, and that can be dealt with in that plan development chapter section. I think it works better that way because you're really customizing the proposed development, and we have those. I mean, obviously, Cedar Falls, Waterloo, all those places are starting to get those where they combine recreation with commercial stores, with restaurants and things on site, with condos and high-rises.
But our downtown, and downtowns for many years have been commercial on let grade, and then you've got apartments above. If I come in, I want to do, a building with commercial on the lowest level and apartments above, and I don't have what are we there, 5 acres now for a PD?
Well, we changed that, didn't we? I think we changed that.
It's still not,
It's not 5 acres anymore.
yeah, but.
Yeah, we reduced that number. I can't remember. I'm pretty sure we reduced
I
that.
thought we reduced it to
Yeah.
5.
To me, a PD can be used, it should be able to be used in almost any setting, except for a 100 by 100 lot or something. It's really one of those, it shouldn't be a size requirement. It should be whether it fits because you're mixing the uses. And that's what we intend to try to enforce it as, and that's if we need to make any tweaks to that, we'll try to make tweaks to that.
So what we're primarily talking about is future expansion.
Right.
And what we're doing is excluding current C2 zoned properties.
Yes, you'd have to rezone to do a different use.
And yet today, that person might want to utilize their C2 property for an apartment complex. And you're telling them that, well, we might rezone, so what we're doing is effectively reducing their marketability and value.
So we're determining where it's appropriate within our community to locate certain use property, and that's what zoning does. Zoning picks some areas that you've chosen to be residential, some areas that you've chosen to be commercial, and some areas that you've chosen to be multi-residential. It's really what we do as zoning, to zone our community. It's putting those uses where we think they're more appropriate to make for a better community. And I think, I'm not trying to keep people from doing an appropriate multifamily complex, but is it going to be appropriate in every place? I think one of the suggestions that somebody thought about on 4th Street, where Dwayne Little's property across from Hy-Vee, whether that would be commercial on the front and maybe an apartment building on the back. Again, that's where I look at it as, it's like you're putting it in C2, but I would talk about maybe doing that as a PD or rezoning the area that you're going to do multifamily. Because it might work on the backside of that, because it has the view of the golf course and that type of thing. And on the front, you'd have the commercial that would be desirable for people that live in a condo in an urban setting. But I think we can still accommodate that, because we can entertain those types of good zoning decisions, like putting that in a PD, putting it or allowing zoning to coexist together.
So number 18 on this, on the C2, also talks about residential units. Does that need to be addressed, or does it allow, could you have fewer than 12 residential? So if you had a building where the first floor was commercial, could you have 6 apartment buildings or 6 apartments in it?
Yeah, and I think
Okay, so it's just not the bigger, like a...
Right, it's not just an apartment building by itself. So that really does include that. You can have residential units above a commercial property. And in C3, that's already allowed. So the downtown properties can do that because they can have commercial above or commercial on the first floor and housing above. So even new property built in C3 could do that.
One of the challenges that has been put before us is when we do this comp plan, we use some great generalities in some area, and people are saying we've got to become more specific about how we designate areas. And this discussion is going to be important because it's going to be with us now for the next year and a half.
If you have any other questions or any other concerns or items for us to consider, just email me. I mean, that's one of those things that you've heard it now, it's going to be brought back before you for action. If you have any comments or anything, I'd love to see it, I'd love to hear it. And so would Isaac, I guess. I'd like to have him do that. I just started this, so that's why I'm finishing it. I'm not going to talk for him every time.
Well, we're changing. And the things that were true 5 years, 10 years ago don't necessarily fit today. And it'll never be so. Other comments? So we'll put this on the agenda for the September, I think it's 5?
Yep,
meeting?
definitely. Yep.
Very good.
Thank you. Now you can go on.
No? Anybody want to adjourn now?
I move we adjourn.
We are adjourned.